Hey everybody, this is Delta Kilo for Second Wind, Into the Breach, out of the Hinnom Valley, March 10th, 2022, Thursday, resuming Episode 3, The Injustice of Justice, Part 3, The Conversation, with John Carlo Garrison Jr. Some things that I need to touch on, as I do very commonly, and will probably continue to do, making sure that I get it all out right there in the beginning of the video. There are things that I need to improve. I'm tracking. There are things that I need to correct. I'm tracking. And the way I stage and prepare for this video, that's going to improve these videos as well. I'm working on that every single day. It's all in my head. Don't think for a minute that I'm just throwing myself out there and that I'm perpetually satisfied right out of the gate. On the contrary, I'm a perfectionist, which is why I'm filming late. It's already after 9 p.m. Nonetheless, got to get this done, and that's the way of truth. Got to have faith, man. Got to talk to Christ. Got to talk to God. You might not have to, but I know that I do. And if you ask me, we can do it together, because that's where I am right now. All right, so I want everybody to understand that there were a number of things that John and I had spoken about that day, August 8th, 2019, Thursday, that were extemporaneous topics in the middle of what we were exchanging, going back and forth about, or just the natural progression. You know, you're talking, one sentence leads to the next, you maybe get a shift or a segue or transition. All right. I'm not going to be going over those things because it's not relevant right now, but make no mistake about it. I have worked. The words are already there, meaning when it's time, when it is appropriate, I'm going to get all that stuff out there. You've heard me say in earlier episodes, I don't want there to be any gaps. All right, so reinforcing that, yesterday I mentioned that the ruling factor in how I'm going to be presenting from this point is the dateline, is the timeline. And in this particular case, it's what happened first, the allegations of what happened first, what was presented to the police, to law enforcement first, their own notes from the case first, and then things that happened beyond that. Now, if any legal people end up watching this, and at some point they will, they're going to say, oh, well, yeah, but that's obvious. You were under investigation, and so they found more things out and they put it in the case. No. Not what I'm saying at all. What I'm talking about is convenience. And I'm talking about dishonesty. Yeah, edits and modifications. All right. All of this will come out in time. Key point for this video part is going to be something that I referenced earlier in episode 3. John and I serving together in the same military unit in 2008, 2009, 2010. All right, so I already knew of John Garrison. I had seen him around. We were in the same battalion. I'm not going to... It would be very easy to be very specific about the military unit we were in. Not yet. The point. I knew of him. We had some interaction, but now I'm joining the same unit as him. He's in a position as such that he and I engaged a lot. In the conversation, now we're talking about that old unit and people in that old unit. The discussion became, over the course of some minutes, I had a lot of enemies from that unit, have a lot of enemies from that unit, because I did the right thing in the right way for the right reasons, because I was a standard bearer, because I didn't get on board. I never got on board. I fought with everybody. Senior leadership was terrible. It was disgraceful. All right, well, at that time, I was a staff sergeant getting promoted to sergeant first class. Rapidly moving forward to 2015, I picked up first sergeant. The second time, so that was 15, 16. The second time I was a first sergeant was in 2018. And man, the part-time forces, it's the difference between active duty and part-time, active duty and National Guard, active duty and Army Reserve. For those of you who have only been part-time, just be quiet. Be quiet, don't say anything. For those of you who were active and went Guard or Reserve, you know. Enough said. Okay, so it was, again, the short backstory being that as I worked my way up the pay grades, I always said that everything that people told me I couldn't do, I could do. I was going to do, and I did it. Working from E4 to E5 to E6 to E7 and then finally first sergeant, everything that people told me I couldn't do, I did those things. So I'm in another unit in South Florida, southern region of Florida. I'm the first sergeant, and everything was coming together. It was a great tour. It was a great tenure. Well, as is the way of things, I ran into all the ugliest people and I had a brand new set of troubles. And I was speaking to John about that. And that tied into the story from 7, 8, 9 years earlier and the troubles I had in the same unit that he and I were in together, which brought up a conversation of names, people who we both knew. That conversation was both random and specific, as it's more a matter of, all right, so people who we knew from back then who are still serving, people who we knew who had, oddly enough, been promoted and then promoted again. I had some things to say about that. It's in the context of everybody joining the United States Army at one point, raised their right hand in front of the flag and swore an oath before God to give a period of honorable service to the United States Army. And man, just so many people don't, and they used to make me crazy. John and other people would try and make it out like my problems were because I wasn't working to be socially equal with my buddies, the soldiers. Yeah, piss on that. All right, anybody who's ever made senior leadership knows you're not there to be friends with your soldiers. You're there to lead them, to guide them, to coach, to counsel, observe, and assess. Be, know, and do. Its own discussion, we'll get to that. Now, the point for me telling you all this now is we're going over some of these people. And I'm speaking about their ugliness, their corruption, all of what I saw and how I felt that I didn't fight hard enough in 08, 09, 2010 with those people when I was serving with them. And so I wasn't as prepared to be as rough and tough and singular in the unit that I was just leaving as a company first sergeant, to square all those clowns away. For everyone who was good there, I remember you, I know you remember me, I left out of there with a lot of respect from a lot of solid mid-level and senior sergeants. We're good. I'll get to that another day. Either way, it was in that conversation, John started doing a different version of the same thing that he did with the whole race thing. What he started saying, what he started doing, here, okay, finishing one thing. So as I state, the discussion's all about the damage and destruction and ugliness of the people who I knew, the people who I saw in this unit. John and I were both in, and what was spun up in me the most, what churned me up the most, made me the most uncomfortable, was realizing after so many years, all the people I know they hurt, all the soldiers that I knew that they hurt, and just shaming and disgracing the United States Army with their every breath. The mighty and noble institution of the U.S. Army. What John began saying at that point simply didn't make any sense. And in the moment, I must concede, I may have taken John for granted. It may have been that he was just a whole lot smarter than I understood, than I realized. By that time, particularly in this conversation, keep in mind what I've already told you in part 2 of episode 3, yesterday, March 9th. Having already seen some of the stock behaviors and methods and tactics that John was doing, maybe I felt a little bit more solid, a little bit more confident, because I was standing ground toe-to-toe with him and deflecting all of that, all of his attempts at just turning the conversation into a gigantic bowl of absurdity. Okay, but here it is now, all over again, not but 10, 15, 20 minutes later, that John's skipping over the points that I'm making about these individual people, and he's ignoring the reality of what I'm saying about these individual people and the damage and destruction that they have done. He's just ignoring the reality and trying to somehow diminish and dismiss and deflect it all. I was getting confused. Bottom line, John was just gaslighting the crap out of me, all right? So I was starting to get really, really irritated. It's, he's blabbering. He's just carrying on and saying the outrageous to try and catch me up, to try and bait me, to get me hooked, to try and get me to respond to what he's saying so that he could say more of it. Textbook gaslighting. I'm talking about something, you say something back to me that doesn't make sense. I go, wait a minute, what are you talking about? You, seeing this as an opportunity to talk about what you want to say and not what I was saying, you immediately begin speaking about this other irrelevant topic. Now I'm like, what? We weren't talking about that, man. What the hell are you saying? Oh, so you have a problem with this? Man, I didn't say I had a problem with anything. We weren't talking about that. Oh, so you don't think we should talk about it? Yeah, okay, maybe we can talk about that tomorrow or the next day, but hey, stop changing the subject. And man, boy, that was John, and he was doing a pretty good job of it, and just would not, man, he just wouldn't let off, leading off into a completely different direction, sabotaging the existing conversation, hijacking it, and leading it off into a irrelevant direction to avoid the conversation that I was trying to have that he obviously was not capable of having at its scope and at its merit. As I say, this is the same thing he did earlier in the same conversation. But you know what? It must be said, maybe he was dragging me around. All right, so there became a point, and sort of, look, let's culminate that. Enough said. John just would not stop trying to take all the things that I was saying that were reasonable and factual regarding the people who I've already referenced. I know I didn't say any names. That's all going to come out. But speaking about their horrid unprofessionalism and corruption, and he started injecting. What did he do? Escalating. He's escalating. He starts suggesting that I'm saying something that I'm not saying, trying to make it out like, well, you know, if you're going to do this, or if you're going to do that, or if you're up to this, or if you're up to that, or wait a minute, you know, you don't understand. Those guys have a right to serve. A right to serve? Ben, what are you even talking about? Some of these people, they're not even in the Army anymore. I'm talking about who they were and what I ultimately know they either became in the Army or where they transitioned into the civilian sector, and imagine the threat that they pose there. Me talking about the threat that they pose there, some of these people, he's not even really acknowledging that. He's taking what I'm saying and he's just turning it back around to me and making it out like, well, if you're saying that you're going to this, I didn't say I was going to do anything. Well, sounds to me like you mean to say, no, I didn't do that at all. Dude, why don't you stop being such a jerk, man? Hey, I'm trying to have a real conversation with you. You're not listening. This is ridiculous, dude. Anyway, it was... Look, bottom line, I've already said, maybe he drugged me around a little bit. He definitely talked some circles, and I had a hard time dealing with it. And it was coming, bottom line, it was coming to a close. The complexity of it all, me realizing that I wasn't going to be able to get him to have a conversation about these people, and having a sense that he was maybe setting me up because he was using some extreme terminology. You know, he's making it out like I'm telling him I'm going to hurt somebody. But I never told him that I was going to hurt anybody. And him making it out like, oh, well, what's that mean? Well, it doesn't mean anything. What are you talking about, man? I'm expressing to him that some of the people who we knew, having gone on to some other occupations where they had real authority and people with them and people behind them who could control life and maybe even control death, I'd be watching out for them. I'd be looking out for them. Why? For fear of my own health and well-being. Thinking about, my God, man, look at the authority that these people have now. What are they doing for a living? Oh, they've become cops. They've become police officers. And they've moved up in the ranks of the police officers, and some of them work in the county where we were, Broward County, Florida. And as I understood it, some of them even work in the city where I